The semiconductor industry now facing another challenge related to that shortage, and that's the weather. Our Josh Lipton has more on that. Morning, Josh.
So, Carl, just when they are needed the most, chip plants are now getting shut down. That's due to these severe winter storms we're seeing in Texas, which have left so many suffering, and they are impacting business, too. Now, forcing chip makers around Austin to suspend operations. For example, NXP, which makes chips for cars, says it halted manufacturing at its 2 Austin facilities. Company says once utility services are restored, its team can evaluate when full production resumes. Samsung, one of the biggest chip makers, is feeling the bite as well. It had to gradually halt operations in Austin after being ordered to do so by local authorities. Analysts estimate that the plants represent about 30% of Samsung's overall production capacity. Infineon also impacted, now idling its Austin plant. Company spokesperson saying the company is evaluating the impact and following local guidelines on reopening. Remember, all this is happening during the most serious chip shortage in years. It's impacting production on everything from computers to cars. Chris Caso at Raymond James says these shutdowns could exacerbate the problem. That is not good news for chip customers like the automakers, but it could be good, he argues, for the chip makers themselves. Shortages push out demand. They don't destroy it. In other words, these chip makers are going to still ship everything they can make and maybe even see their margins expand because they're going to have to allocate scarce supply to their highest margin customers. Chris's top picks right now, he tells me, NXP and Microchip, Micron in memory, and Qualcomm in handsets. Carl, back to you.
That's a great setup, Josh. Thanks, our Josh Lipton. It does remind me, by the way, Leslie, you talked about this on the show yesterday. Wells today takes Western Dig from $65 to an $85 target, but it just sort of feeds the overall narrative, and that is that we're going to be talking about scarcity in general on a host of products all year long.
Absolutely. I mean, when we look at just what, 4 days worth of a situation like this where so much of the supply chain has been disrupted, look at what's going on with vaccine distribution in Texas right now. It's not just limited to chips, but the whole economy in the state is basically turned to a halt. And there was that really interesting article in the Texas Tribune. I think it came out yesterday afternoon where they said that the system was within seconds or even minutes of having a complete failure for months on end. Can you imagine what that would mean for the state's economy, especially in a pandemic where people are so reliant on not just power to stay warm and do their basic jobs and lives, but their jobs are taking place so much more online. Their ability to connect with, family and friends is so much more online. And so the thought of the state of Texas not having power for months on end in the middle of a pandemic, it's pretty scary when you think about it.
Yeah, and of course, we're going to keep an eye. This story that Josh was outlining so well for us about chips is not going anywhere. We talked yesterday to Vincent Roche, CEO of Analog Devices. They're going to meet their guidance, but, and perhaps they can exceed it, but in part they are reliant on other wafers coming in that they then do things with. And it's going to be a story, as he said, that we're going to be dealing with these shortages throughout the rest of the year. Obviously, we see it, Carl, perhaps manifest most in the auto industry. We're talking about Ford and GM, for example, but it will be sort of throughout. And then we come back to this idea of a national champion. I look at Intel there and what that will mean as the U.S. government tries to sort of figure out a policy there to make sure that we have adequate supplies domestically as well of chip-making ability.
Do you think that M&A solves the problem at all?
Unclear. Unclear at this point whether that would be the case. When it comes to M&A, we obviously are looking at NVIDIA, which is in a deal to acquire ARM. That certainly has some potential issues. Qualcomm has tried. Broadcom. It's possible, Leslie. But again, then you'd have the U.S. government sort of weighing in a significant way from an antitrust perspective. On the other side, Carl, though, being a national defense perspective as well, given the two are tightly linked when it comes to chip making.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.